To motion number 6, Phil Caswell from South Staff's LDC.
Good afternoon, conference. To err is human. In an average month, we as dental practitioners might perform hundreds of intricate clinical procedures involving biological systems attached to often anxious and reluctant patients. On occasion, problems will occur and sometimes mistakes will be made. We are currently under the spotlight of a group of regulators that seems to be disconnected from this unfortunate truth. It's created an oppressive working environment that has raised stress levels in the profession and now appears to be influencing the very way we practice, with evidence that clinicians are becoming increasingly risk-averse. The result is that hospitals have become swamped with inappropriate referrals, and more importantly perhaps, that young practitioners are failing to further develop their clinical skills in practice and reach their full potential through fear of reprimand and reprisal. Other professional bodies, as in the airline industry, foster an open and reflective response to the human factor. The reporting of mishaps and mistakes is encouraged and lessons learned, leading to the design and refinement of safer systems. Why not our profession? I urge conference to vote for this motion.
Thank you very much, Phil. Right, we have no speakers, so we're going to go straight to the vote. Motion 6. Those in favour, please. Those against? Any abstentions? Excellent. Motion carried. Well done. Unanimous again. Thank you. Right. Next we have from Birmingham LDC, Peter Thornley. Peter is a first-time speaker. Hey.
Thank you. Good afternoon, conference. A surgeon writing in the Royal College of Surgeons Bulletin recently said this: "A major mistake was made at the end of the last century when the British government decided not to allow the professions to police themselves. Instead, non-experts, ignorant of the tasks in hand, are given control with inevitable bad consequences. Add to the mix our administrators, who collude and criticise rather than encourage and nurture, and we are set for calamity." As we've heard from the two previous speakers, and as a training programme director myself for Dental Foundation Training, I think that calamity is already upon us. There is a climate of fear that grips young dentists and students, and it's acknowledged by the General Dental Council's own research. The GDC have recently launched a charm offensive and passed the blame onto teachers and others who tell young dentists and students horror stories. But I know from experience mentoring foundation dentists that often those horror stories are rooted in fact. One of my foundation dentists faced 10 months of stress and worry following a patient complaint about complications from endodontic treatment. Whilst waiting for the GDC to decide whether fitness to practice proceedings were required, he told me, "I used to do bar work as a student. I'll return to that if this goes against me." Another FD's clinical audit showed that she must spend an average of 12 minutes writing up her notes for every patient encounter as she follows the guidance of the GDC, the FGDP and the Defence Societies. So no wonder that we see record levels of mental health problems amongst students and foundation dentists and other members of the profession. The GDC is responsible for maintaining the confidence of the public in the profession, but it's undermined the self-confidence of professionals in themselves by actions such as placing adverts in newspapers advising the public to complain about their dentist. This has led to a negative effect on patients. Dentists practice defensively. They're scared to intervene when intervention is necessary, increasing the risks such as sepsis. General anaesthetics are refused to children in pain because an orthodontic opinion could not be sought out beforehand. Many of the young dentists I work with no longer want a lifelong career in dentistry, and older dentists are taking early retirement. The crisis in recruitment for doctors will follow in dentistry unless we take radical steps to change the environment. This requires leadership from the GDC. They've taken some steps, but unfortunately, the confidence of the profession in the GDC will not return whilst they're led by a layperson who's never had to make clinical decisions or take clinical action, knowing their own social, technical and resource limitations. For the good of the profession and the public, I believe it's imperative that the leadership of the GDC is returned to a dentist, and I ask the conference to support the motion that we demand that the chair of the GDC is replaced with a dentist, which is imperative for the long-term benefits of the profession and patients. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Right. This is going to be the last motion before we have our first guest speaker, but we have Eddie Crouch first, who will speak for the motion. Sorry, Russell.
Welcome everyone to Birmingham. Hope you have a great 2 days in my city as well. I'm speaking on behalf of this motion. I've seen, well, myself and Mick and many people from the BDA and other people went along to the Health Select Committee where Evelyn and Bill were there. It was quite an interesting day, and he dodged, well, many believe that he dodged some bullets that day. There have been people that within the GDC that have actually done some very positive things. Matthew Hill came recently to one of our West Midlands LDC meetings where he spoke about the moving upstream. In fact, it was launched in this very room a few months back, and there have been some positive moves by the GDC. We can't deny that. Bill Moyes actually gave us a speech from this very parapet here, probably this very spot that on that particular day. It was a very good speech. I wonder who wrote it for him. Anyway, the long and short of it is I agree totally with the motion that's been put before you, and I ask you to support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eddie. Right. We shall go to the vote. This is motion number 7 from Birmingham LDC. Those in favour of motion 7, please. Thank you. Those against? Any abstentions? Okay, carried unanimously. Well done, Peter. Thank you.
So the motion relates to direct-to-patient dentistry. So I don't know how much people in the room will be aware of how much this goes on. There are 2 types that I'm aware of personally, which is direct-to-patient ortho and what's called clip-on veneers. Generally, these are provided by non-dentists or they're provided outside the UK. So if we take the clip-on veneers, they typically are UK-based companies with no dentists involved. They send out impression materials, the patient takes an impression of their mouth, sends it back, and then there's an appliance made, typically I think actually in China. There's no assessment, there's no dentist involvement. The patients that they see, if you look at these patients, and they post pictures on Facebook and other places, have caries, perio. They're providing equivalents of bridges over periodontally involved teeth. There's no regulation for these companies, so that in terms of cross-infection and all the things that we have to go through. The other side being the direct-to-patient orthodontics, which is a big growth area at the moment. There's a company called Frank Smile that appears on my Facebook feed on a regular basis. When you investigate, and it took quite a long time to find out, this is actually a German-based company. They claim that there's a dentist involved that looks at cases, but you won't get a name, and they're not GDC registered because they're not inside the UK. They, again, take impressions of patients, and they provide Invisalign-type appliances direct to the patient who's never been seen, never had radiographs taken. There is a real risk of harm to these patients who are being inappropriately treated. I've seen a copy of an email that the GDC sent to one of the clip-on veneer companies saying they didn't consider clip-on veneers to be the practice of dentistry. They weren't interested in it. If and when these patients have issues through this, they're not going to find someone to complain to. There's not someone within the company, and the GDC currently aren't interested. The GDC are there to protect patients. They should be going out and finding these companies and bring them in line with the regulations that we have to comply with. It's very easy for companies to provide cheap alternatives to what we provide when they don't have to go through the regulation that we have to go through. So I would urge you to support the motion and try and get the GDC to take responsibility for the patients that they claim to protect. Thank you.
Very much. Thank you, Russell. We have 2 speakers. The first is Roger Levy, Enfield and Haringey LDC, and Roger is speaking against the motion.
I'd like to say, first of all, that while I am speaking against the motion, I'm certainly in support of some form of control. I'm not sure that it's for the GDC, though. I think what we all are already extremely aware of is that the GDC is always very happy indeed to engage in mission creep. We have to remember also that there is going to be cost involved in them getting into this, and that cost is going to be our cost. It has to be something which really threatens patients. It has to be seen to be threatened patients. I'm not really sure that there's any evidence that the provision of grills, as they're called, and things like that, do threaten patients, and I really am not happy about more money being spent by the GDC simply because they're invited to take the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Next, we have Nick Stoles, GDPC member, speaking against this motion.
I have very similar concerns to Roger. That is that there are other routes for prosecution of these organisations. We've seen one recently in Northern Ireland where somebody was selling bleach, was taken to court by the local authority. I don't want our ARF to go up simply because of the policing of the GDC over these particular cases. So I would urge you to vote against this motion.
Okay, thank you. Right, we'll go to a vote then. This is motion number 8. Those in favour of motion 8, raise your cards, please. Thank you. Those against? Okay, sorry. I think we're going to have to do this again. Can we have those in favour, please? Those against? Right, okay, I think we're going to need a count. Move on to the next motion. Coming back to motion 8. This was from Gwent LDC. Motion 8 has been defeated.